This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World. Hello, podcast listeners. Today's guest is Carrie Wintersteen, the director of Cry It Out, going on at Theater B, and we are going to talk about parenting. We're going to talk about the stuff, the deep, gross, disgusting stuff that deals with parenting that nobody wants to talk about other than on a subreddit somewhere. We're going to do that right here. Plus, Tucker and I talk about toys from our childhood and how even today I am playing with a toy while I am recording this. So why don't you do me a favor and go to patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld and support this podcast. But there's no better time than now to say, podcast, go.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
When I was a little kid, my favorite toy is a toy that they still make to this day. It's a little car with a little steering wheel, and it's got the bright yellow top, like would be the top, and then the red base.
Your first car.
My first car. I loved that car. And I remember even being too big to get into it, but still trying to get into it.
It's American made, got great gas mileage.
Great mileage. When we gave that away, even though I was well into, because my sister used it, so I was probably 8 or 9 when we finally gave it away. It was horrible. I was riding a bike at that time. I had remote controlled toys and all this other stuff, but that was a horrific moment for me to say goodbye to that car. And it had seen better days. Like, it was missing a back wheel, so when you were in it, you had to lean to one side, so it put most of the weight on the two wheels on that side. Wheels. I still, when I see kids playing with that toy today, I get a little bit jealous.
Yeah.
And if they made an adult size version of that, I think I would probably pick it up. And you and I could push it along because it was foot powered like a Flintstones vehicle.
Car.
But do you have any toys from your childhood that you vividly remember as something that you loved?
Yeah, I mean, I've a bunch. There's one. The first one that jumps to my mind, though, was a birthday present, I think, from my stepdad. And it was this mechanical gorilla. It was like a cyborg gorilla. And it was about a foot tall, maybe a little bit shorter than that. and you had to piece it together. And it was actually a pretty complicated piece together because it had a tiny little motor inside of it. And then you had to build the whole body and the structure and everything and follow this instruction book. And it took me a couple hours to do it. But that toy is the first one that really bubbled up to my mind of one that I wish I still had, because I would love to just look at it, just to have the memories of using that toy. Otherwise, I had a Fozzie Bear doll that I was really attached to. I'd made him fight with Gonzo all the time. And then Ninja Turtle action figures. I still think of that very first Michelangelo I had, where it wasn't the standard stock model. It was like a zany one where he's got his tongue sticking out and you turn a crank on his side and it makes his fist spin. And I remember getting that one vividly at Christmas at my grandparents' house in Moorhead. And I still have that thing, though. It's all chewed up.
They did a really good job with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of making you buy multiple versions of the Turtles.
They knew what they were doing.
They were like, oh, it's the astronaut Mikey. Got
all this leftover plastic. What should we do with it? Oh, let's make a bunch of toys out of it.
Yeah, pizza delivery Donnie.
Yep.
I think toys for kids, whether they are something that you buy at a store, something that's handed down from a previous generation, or something that people have made themselves, are the beginning of imagination.
Think of the new Toy Story, right?
Yeah.
The new toy is a handcrafted toy that the
Forky.
kid that the kid made in school.
Yeah. Full disclosure, Toy Story 4 hasn't been released yet, so we don't know if it's a piece of garbage or a cinematic masterpiece. So people may years later be like, Forky, I remember that. Oh yeah, you didn't see that fourth Toy Story movie.
Yep.
We stopped. It's like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull with the Indiana Jones
I don't
series.
think that's going to happen. I feel good about this one.
I don't. The fact that they're relying so heavily on a Beach Boys song really gives me some worry with it. Our guest today is Carrie Wintersteen, executive director at Theater B, and we talk about parenting a lot with this, specifically being new parents, and the play that Theater B is putting on, Cry It Out, which is a play about parenting. It's about everything that people discuss that no one wants to talk about. Who's going to go back to work? What kind of money are we talking about when raising a child? Who really has the better, day, the stay-at-home parent or the parent that goes to work? Do you instantly love your child?
Mm-hmm. And this is, I believe, I might be wrong about this. This might be the first Theater B show that Carrie was the solo director on.
Really?
I might be wrong. There might be one previous, so maybe this is the second. It's been a long time. But Carrie is typically in this town, if you hear Carrie is involved with a play, that means she's going to be on stage because she's one of the most recognized actors in town. But she is the director of this show. And as we talk about in the show, she brings her own motherhood to the table when making this art.
Yeah, it definitely gives you a different idea and sense and feel. So here's what I want you folks to do. I want you to listen to this podcast and then head over to theaterb.org. Reserve your tickets for Cry It Out. If you're listening to this after the show has closed, go and read the rave reviews about Cry It Out.
And if you're listening to this the day that this podcast launches, the show opens tonight.
Yeah, and opening weekend is pay what you will. Yeah. Not pay what you want. Pay what you will.
Pay what you will.
So drop a Benjamin in there. Folks, before I let you get to this podcast, I also want to quickly thank our Patreon subscribers. They're awesome people. Our Patreon donations right now are actually covering the cost with our sponsorship for this podcast. So we are, for the first time ever, at a $0 balance.
The partnership of our sponsor and our Patreon patrons are now making it easier for you and I to make this show happen.
Correct. Now, if you want to go to Patreon and get on the sponsorship, we've got big plans that are going to cost a little bit of money. And so we would love it to come on and be part of that Patreon family.
Right. And 2019 is the year that we're really we're going to take some new steps. I mean, we've been talking about getting a merch store set up pretty soon.
Taking the show on the road. Doing some special Patreon only stuff. But as we're figuring all of that out, we would love to hear from you what you think, what you would like to see on the show. You know, if you're a regular on our show, if you listen to the show regularly and you're like, I just haven't been able to, afford to help you guys out with some Patreon dollars, but if you offered this, so that'd be more likely to let us know. We're growing this show and we're growing. Growing
this. What am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say something special.
Here's how I'm going to tie this back. This podcast is like our baby, and Tucker and I are new parents.
Yep.
And
I'm the stay-at-home mom.
So help us make these decisions. Help guide us as we take care of our little podcast baby. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World with Carrie Wintersteen.
JJ Meets World.
Carrie Wintersteen, welcome back to JJ Meets World.
Woo-hoo! It's so fun to be here.
Thank you very much for taking a morning to sit with us and have a chat.
This is a morning of my tech rehearsal. So this was and it was a late night last night, and it was an early morning today, but I'm very happy. I have to give a shout out to David. Thank you for getting up and making me breakfast.
Oh, what did he make?
He made sausage and fried eggs and English muffin with homemade peach jam.
That's a dedicated TD right there. My goodness. Oh, that's right. You guys are married too.
It is important to keep the director happy.
So I've been following a little bit on Theater B's latest production, and it seems like food has been a part of this. I've seen previous guests like Rachel Geinert has had people have been bringing food to her.
Yes.
And of course it makes sense when you think of the context of the play, which we'll get into in a moment, but food would be a part of that
Absolutely.
Nurturing aspect that is food.
It is. Food and beverage are important in this play.
Do you have something from your childhood that is the ultimate comfort food for you?
Oh, probably not from my childhood. It's funny because my husband is a much better cook than my mother ever was.
Oh, yeah?
I hate to say that, but
oh no, I've
yes.
tasted some of David's food.
He's
top notch.
He's way better. So, I actually do still like tater tot hot dish, but I have to make it myself in order to have that because, okay, here's an example. Last night, the food. Oh my God. Okay. So David knew that he was going to have the kids home for a few meals this weekend. So he kind of went crazy. Yesterday it was ribs, but he'd gotten them a couple days earlier and they've been marinating in the fridge for a couple of days. And then he smoked them yesterday. So they were so tender and amazing. And then he made, homemade cornbread to go with that. And it was just an astonishing dinner. And so, this whole weekend of feasting will be delightful, but yeah.
Did you find it odd that I can't think of a restaurant locally that has tater tot hot dish on the menu? Do you think it's because it would be sacrilegious to eat a restaurant tater tot hot dish?
Because a lot of them
suspicious.
sell tater tots as like a side dish. But
yeah.
And people love tater tot hot dish.
Yeah. But I mean, if you went into a restaurant and you were going to order the tater tot hot dish, in some ways, I'd be a little bit skeptical about, can this be anywhere as good as mine? I mean, maybe, if Eric Watson put it on the menu over at Rustica, I'd say, oh, okay.
Sure.
Because, those tater tots are probably fried in duck fat, right?
Yeah.
And then you'd be like, this is better than what I can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got the great opportunity to judge the Fargo Hot Dish Festival in early 2019.
JJ, we need to create a wall of all of the judging you've done of food competitions.
Yes.
So I actually was thinking about launching a website as a professional food judge where if you guys, so I'm Kansas City Barbecue Society certified, which means I went and took a class on judging barbecue.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. And so every now and then I get invited to a small town who wants to have a KCBS sanctioned competition. So I get to go out there and I get to taste ribs and brisket and
I'm
chicken.
so
It's
sorry.
great.
That's terrible.
I know, it's so
what
hard.
An awful side gig.
But I do judge a lot. I've judged chili competitions. And when it boils down to it, what I think all the time is it's up to the individual palate, right? There's some things that is universal, like tenderness. Now, what's tough to you might be mostly tough to me, but we both agree that the word tough is in the description of the tenderness.
Right.
But when it comes to taste, everyone's palate is completely different.
Completely different in terms of how much sugar or acid or salt or heat that you really like or can stand or, yeah.
I read an article recently that non-alcoholic mouthwash is really popular right now, but one of the additives that are in most of those mouthwashes will actually dull or kill your taste buds. And so people are saying, I've been using this mouthwash for like 2 weeks and I keep having to put more and more salt on my food. It's because you're killing your taste buds.
Whoa.
And so you got to stop using the mouthwash and let your taste buds heal so you can get your taste back.
Whoa.
Oh.
Yeah. Not
Consumer
worth
no.
protection warning.
Hashtag not worth it.
You know?
Yeah, no, not worth it.
No, not at all. So let's talk about the Cry It Out.
Cry it out.
Going on at Theater B.
The mommy play.
The mommy play. Yes. Oh, well, and not just mommy play, right? There's a daddy in it. And it's fabulous because our daddy is a daddy and is about to be a daddy again. So, no, he totally gets it.
Previous guest, Tim Larson.
Yes, Tim Larson. And it's so good having some testosterone in the room, I have to tell you. It's astonishing, actually, just how different this rehearsal process is when it's not quite as mixed as some other shows are. Just the proportion of estrogen in the room is really high.
So what's the plot line of Cry It Out?
So Cry It Out, the plot line is basically about how parenting is one of those somewhat hidden common threads that people have that connect them even when they come from really different backgrounds. And the play highlights the ways in which, actually just even the choice of having children is not readily available to everyone. That parenting is a really personal thing in terms of how you do it and the choices you make about how you parent. And yet it's so universal. Everyone has to make the choices about how to parent. And particularly this play highlights the ways in which there are some really absurd choices parents have to make, particularly now in modern day America, with regard to finances. That when you have a child, your whole life is upside down. Everything is different than it was before. And you may or may not have economic choice about how to parent. And so the play really, sort of points at how absurd it is, the choices that we have to make and the expectations that we have for women, and how they are different from the expectations we have for men when they become parents.
Right. Because when dad's just alone with the kid, they call it babysitting. When mom is just alone with the kid, they call that parenting.
Yeah, that's one of the things. And particularly we highlight, the play highlights the expectation that, of course, a man's going to go back to work and not have huge holes in his resume, and he's going to do both, right? And then there's that expectation that women may not go back to work, that they might stay home. But then we also sort of punish them economically for having huge holes in their resume, this absent time. Why weren't you, what are all these years where you weren't working and advancing your career?
Or what about the fact that until only recently, when a woman had to tell a supervisor that she was pregnant, it was met with the possibility that, like, you might not have your job waiting for you.
That's right.
You've made a bad decision.
Right. Oh God. Yeah. No. Yeah. Job security. Yeah. So that's in the play, and it's really fascinating because it's not preachy or anything. It's just you get to know these characters. They're struggling with these questions and these issues and the choices that they have or don't have, and it's just right out there, and you kind of scratch your head and go, oh yeah, and it's sort of this extraordinary of the mundane. Right? The daily grind. David and I, we always called parenting the long dark tunnel because you're out in the world as young professionals and a couple or whatever, and then suddenly you have this baby and you're you're totally isolated. You are totally isolated for a period of time. You don't go out socially. You're not in your work environment. It's really hard to get out of the house for anything. And it's like this long, dark tunnel of parenting where the rest of the world doesn't really think about the kinds of daily or momentary decisions that you have to make in terms of how you're going to raise this child and what your relationship is and whether or not you're doing a good job. There's nobody there checking. I remember just being absolutely astonished when the nurses at the hospital said, okay, you can go home. And it had been 24 hours. And I was like, why? What? I'm not prepared.
What happens now?
I'm going to kill this little person, right? I mean, before the person was inside my body, there was nothing I had to consciously do to care for it. My body just knew what to do. And I always said, thank God my body knew what to do. I would have been like, oh shit, I forgot to add thumbs, right? Like today was the day that should have happened at this time. And, thank God I didn't actually, my body was just doing all that stuff. But then suddenly it's all conscious and you're supposed to just suddenly know exactly how to bathe someone or feed someone or, manage no sleep. It's total Stockholm syndrome, right? I mean, like no sleep for months and months and months. And you're supposed to sort of be at your best because this is actually this incredibly formative time for a whole human being.
It'll come so naturally.
Yeah, and that's total bullshit, So anyway, it's crazy making.
I don't know why pregnancy, childbirth, and parenting are secrets that some people are keeping from other people. Because here's the thing, how many babies have been born throughout the history of the world, and yet it's not until like the last minute where someone's like, well, you're gonna like vaginal tearing is very common.
Right.
And you go like, whoa, wait, what? My mom didn't tell me this. My girlfriends didn't tell me this. It's something that just sort of happens. And let alone, I know it's a shock for the woman, but it's even more shocking for the men who don't know that this is about to take place, and they're trying to be
view.
Yep, and they're trying to be supportive, and they're like, oh my God, she's ripping apart. It's like that scene from Aliens.
Exactly.
I was from my mother's womb untimely ripped, so I didn't have to have that
too.
issue. Yeah, nice.
So I was a month late.
Oh,
late. So I was supposed to be born in early September. Finally, the
You're
doctor.
like, it's warm in here.
Yeah, it's so cozy. Finally, the doctor's like, well, we're gonna do a cesarean, and you pick the date of the next 4 days. And my mom was like, oh, okay, well, this day. And then my sister was a month late. So for whatever reason, we were really enjoying that gestation process.
Yeah. Oh,
I might still be there.
I have the best kids, and it started with they both came early.
I will say this, the Wintersteen kids are kind of aliens because they're not like typical kids.
No,
they're both whip smart, incredibly polite. And the thing is
outgoing too, which is odd to find in kids nowadays who are becoming more individualized because of cell phones and video games and stuff like that.
Well, and I've watched them grow up. They feel like little cousins to me because I watched them as little kids turn into what they are now, and even Linka to this day has retained the quality she had as a child, where when she entered a room, you thought you heard a piccolo somewhere. Like you were like, did fairy magic just walk in here? And it's, hello, mother. Hello, father. How are you today? And it's completely legit. It's not an act.
Yeah, no, it's not an act. No, she's a real sweetie. And she did. She wanted to enter the world like right away. She tried to come really early, and we had to stop that one. She tried to come before Christmas because it's like, everybody's together at Christmas. I want to meet them all. I can hear them. And then we were like, no, you have to wait. So then we had her in January. And she's just like, but she was tiny. So it was, in some way, not that it was easy, but I was aware that both my children were a little small, and that was at least easier. Although, holy buckets. I thought that there would be some sort of award for doing it without medicine and pain reliever and epidural and all that shit. And I was like, where the frick is my trophy? And David's like, well, you have this small human. And I was like, well, I was going to get the human anyway. I still want the tiara, that says I did this without an epidural. Because I did both mine natural. And that was
And
Cool.
so was it a long conversation about the epidural, or you knew like, nope, this is not what I'm going to do?
No, it was funny. When we were in childbirth class, the teacher had us do a really funny thing, which was all parents in the room had a piece of paper, and on it they were going to write down a number between 0 and 10, 0 being no medical intervention or as little as possible, and 10 being I want everything to, mitigate this, right? And so all the mothers and all the fathers in the room are writing down this number, and and then the teacher says, okay, so let's compare our numbers. Just how much does the wife think she's getting and how much does the husband think she's getting? And let me tell you, those couples who was where the husband was 0 and the wife was 10, they had some shit to work out, right? But David and I were actually both pretty close and on the bottom end of the scale. We had talked about it. He knew that I was interested in trying to do natural childbirth if I could, right? So he was like, he'd put down a 2 or a 3, and I'd put down a 1 or a 0. So we were close, but he was sort of more inclined toward if she wants pain relief or it looks like she needs pain relief and she can't really even judge it, I'll say yes. He was slightly more inclined toward that than I was. I was like, but anyway.
I would definitely listen to the person who is giving birth. Be like, oh, what do you need?
Yeah.
I don't think you do. No, I'm not going to make that decision
in
for
some
you.
ways, giving the piece of paper to husbands was mostly a tactic for her to note, by the way, this actually isn't, it might become up to you, but you should ignore your number.
Right.
And pay attention to her number.
I would put down 10 because they probably wouldn't use it all, and then maybe I'd get some of it too.
I think David wanted it. I crushed his hand. I absolutely crushed his hand during my birth with Cameron.
Well, my little sister is going to be having a baby boy here in June, which I'm really excited about. Yay. And so right now she looks like she's late, like she's very pregnant.
Well, she's a tiny person, it really shows. Yeah. At this stage.
But I've said this to a few people before. I've never really, I kind of knew this when my mom was pregnant with my little brother because I was in the 7th grade. So I have memories of that time, but you're a different person than you are now. And when I found out that my little sister was pregnant, I had never really noticed the feeling of loving someone who isn't here yet.
Yeah.
Like I suddenly fell in love with it. I didn't even know the gender of the baby at that point. I didn't know, I still don't know the name because they're keeping that from us until the actual birth. We know it's a baby boy. But that feeling is just, and this is not even my child, right? This is my nephew. But the fact that it's my little sister, my baby sister's baby is just, it even changes like the color of the room you're in, and the taste of food. It's so crazy. So I wonder once I finally create a mini, whatever I am, what that's going to be like.
It's astonishing. The expectation of pregnancy is so overwhelming, right? It's so huge. It's months and months and months of waiting to meet this person. And you love them already unconditionally, even though they haven't arrived yet. It's a really astonishing, I don't know. I think of it as a pretty amazing biological mechanism for us to care for offspring, for us to have that feeling of love, absolutely unconditional love and care for this human that's going to arrive. And I know it's an imperative for us to continue the species, but it is kind of fascinating. And then, and I think this play kind of gets at that. There are some really delightful jokes about, one of my favorite lines is about how, you're kept captive all day by a little larval creature who would literally die if you checked your email or took a leisurely dump.
Right.
Oh yeah. The commitment to that is really it's just astonishing. It totally teaches selflessness. Well, that's what parenting does.
When we were even first talking about the show at B before we decided to do it, the conversations were early on, this is a play that should be directed by a mother. This is a play that should have mothers in the cast, right? This is play that really that the themes of the play are so tied in with that that I feel like had it been me directing that show, it would have not made any sense. I have no frame of reference for any of these characters or any understanding of this world. How do I direct actors in those scenes?
That's a lot of it, is simply being able to answer questions. And I've been taking a lot of cues actually from the parents in the cast, because parenting is different now than it was, 20 years ago when I was having my children. There are certain, they're just references in the play and props in the play and conventions in the play. Like the women meet in a space in their yard where each of them can still get the signal from their baby monitors. I didn't have baby monitors 20 years ago. I left my baby in a room, in a crib, and went to a different part of the house or the yard and trusted that baby would still be there 2 hours later and be fine, right? I didn't need to watch the baby sleeping or listen to the baby sleeping. And I don't know, in some ways, I think it helps that I think my kids are pretty independent, partly because of that, because we did do the technique of cry it out. Let them cry it out. Learn that nobody's coming for them and they have to figure out how to self-soothe.
Right. Is it like Ferberizing? Like, is that the like there's a specific method that goes for that self-soothing?
Oh.
And parents will talk about, like, are you Ferberizing your baby? And they're like, oh God, no.
It sounds like you're spraying it with chemicals.
Yeah.
I know. I don't know that term.
There's this very specific term, and it's for the what's the baby doctor name?
Dr. Spock?
No, yeah, I mean Dr. Spock, but like what pediatrician. It's a pediatrician who developed this method.
A particular method of, and then it gets named for them. Yeah.
Yep.
It has been really great to be directing a play about parenting and having been a parent, having been through that, and also having been through some of the other circumstances that are in the play. So one of the other things that the playwright points at in terms of this sort of sense of isolation that you go through when you're a new parent, she also is pointing at the ways in which when you live in a place that is new, there's also that isolation, right? So a couple of these characters have moved to this place because it's not the city. It's not, the play takes place in Long Island. And so these characters have all been living in the city in New York, and then recognize that maybe an apartment that's a fourth floor walk up isn't the easiest place to raise a child or have a baby or carry, that car seat up and down and up and down. And so they moved to Long Island as a way to parent in a just physical space that's going to be more accommodating. But what they recognize is that now they're in a new place and they have to make new friends. They have to figure out their new neighborhood. What's their community here? How is it that these people who are in vastly different economic circumstances, but in the same geographical area, what is their point of connection? And their point of connection is child rearing. And that's kind of the experience that I had. I moved here pregnant with Linka. So, like, who were my friends? Well, they weren't theater friends. They weren't necessarily academic friends. They weren't media friends. I mean, none of that. I didn't have any of the usual social structures that I had had. So who do I become friends with? A woman down the block who is also expecting a child the same winter that I am. And we both go into the long, dark tunnel of having children in the middle of the winter in Fargo. And it's like not until May, June, July that you're like, thank God I can get out of the house and meet people.
That's like a long, dark tunnel inside of a long, dark tunnel.
It is.
To do that over winter here in Fargo.
Yeah.
Do you remember the movie Waiting for Guffman, where she's talking about, like, we mainly hang out with other people who have babies. Most of our friends, like, we only go out with the other people who have babies. And I think that there's a real truth to that, to where we know that there's a pack and play already at this destination. So even if they're not your favorite people on the planet, you are going to associate with them more often.
Right.
I think of on the block I grew up on, I was born, and then 3 months later, one of our neighbors had a baby. We ended up being best friends growing up because it's a kid who's right at your same age.
Right there.
And I've got a picture of both his dad and my dad holding us in this photo. We're like, well, these two guys have nothing in common except for those babies.
Exactly. It's a totally arbitrary friendship that develops, right? It's not. And that's how I was. I was like, I'm meeting all these people who I might not otherwise meet at all. And yet, nope, we're hanging out because our babies were born at the same time.
And it kind of dictates, like, not only your friendships, but in your social calendar, but like even the things you're interested in.
Right.
My mom took up bowling after my sister was born, only because there was a midday ladies bowling league for mothers, and the bowling alley ran a daycare during the time
that
the league was going on. And so I remember talking to my mom later on in life, and she goes, oh, God. She goes, I hated bowling, but I loved those 2 hours. They were great. She goes, I met women that I had never known before, and, none of us cared if we were bowling well. We just cared that we had this time and that we knew that. And it's great. She goes, because they put the daycare in a room behind where the pins are all set up. So there wasn't even a moment where you're like, I'm just going to go over and just look. She goes, no. She's like, that whole time was just for the women. And you knew that there's no exit out the side. So if someone comes through, you're going to know if someone's trying to take your baby. But short of that, there was no escape from that room. So she goes, oh, you felt so comfortable the whole time.
Yeah.
And there's modern day parenting, there's so much pressure. The people who are thinking already, okay, I know that I want my kid to be in this particular school school system.
Yep.
I know that I want my particular kid to take these lessons.
Yes.
And the things that are all pre-planned before you even have the baby.
Oh, yeah. I had an inkling of it when we arrived here. When the summer that I was pregnant with Linka, we were both working down at Theater La Homadou in Alexandria. So I was actually doing 3 shows back to back while pregnant. Oof. It was just really grueling.
Were they all pregnant characters?
No, but it was funny. I mean, like, the first character was an Olympic swimmer, so I was like, hide that teeny tiny, like, maybe little bump happening. And then the second character was Rosie in Bye Bye Birdie, and I'm like, oh yeah, because I look so Hispanic, but whatever. So I had to dance, and luckily she did sort of the Ampere waist 50s thing, so we could cover. And then the third one was Penny in You Can't Take It With You, the mother. And I was like, okay, now I'm just frumpy. 20s once again, no waist, that's good. 20s is good, in terms of costuming. And then by then it was okay that I had kind of had a little extra weight on me to age me a little bit. But when we were, one show was open, and so you have a day off, and I drove up from Alexandria, and the first person I met with was Anita Brandenburg at Cobber Kids Daycare. Oh. I didn't want anybody else in town to know that I was pregnant because I was looking for a job, right? But the very first person I met with was the daycare. I went to the daycare and I said, I'd like to sign up a child for next September, not this one, but next, because the baby's due in January. And they let me do that. So that I could get a spot, because I knew that daycare was incredibly popular and very crowded. And certainly for newborns, there's only so many newborns you can take, because the ratio of teacher to, or childcare provider to child needs to be much higher than when it's toddlers running around or preschoolers running around. And so that was my first stop. And it was great, because then at the end of our nice conversation, I said, oh, and by the way, do you happen to know any realtors? And she chuckled and said, well, if you don't think it's inappropriate, my husband is a realtor. That'd be great. So she called him up and said, hey, come to the daycare right now. You have somebody who needs to look for a house.
I mean, that may have just been a power move to make sure that you solidified your spot at the daycare.
Oh, no.
And if it was Carrie and you're just not telling us, kudos.
I had no idea. I was not quite so, I don't think I was that intelligent at the time, but whatever, it worked. So yes. But yeah, that sense of having to, and they touch on that in the play too, that the sort of pressure of these expectations that then come later as well, that once you've brought this child into the world, you have all these responsibilities in terms of raising it well, setting it up for success in the world. And what are the kinds of sacrifices you are willing to make? And in the case of the play, they really are looking at this sort of existential crisis of, wow, in order to parent my child well, I have to not parent my child. I have to go back into the workforce in order to have enough money to do these other things, as opposed to staying home and parenting my own child, because that does not give us the financial flexibility to do the lessons, to go to the right daycare, to have the 529 plan so they can go to good colleges, right? And it's that debate about which thing is more valuable, which kind of choices are better for your baby.
Well, and
Never mind better for you, right? Like, your happiness is not actually anybody's concern. The world doesn't give a shit if you're happy.
How many couples out there have this conversation? Okay, so we know we're going to need daycare. Is it worthwhile for one of us to just not work and stay home versus you working, but all of your income is going to this daycare to pay for this service? And I know people who've had that conversation, and I'll be talking to another one of my friends. I'll be like, my wife and I were having this conversation. And I always ask the same question, which is, do you think it's important for... First of all, I don't think it's right that it's automatically assumed that the wife is going to stay home,
Correct.
right? Because sometimes she can be the better, breadwinner when it comes to the house.
Yep.
And look, you should look at what her career is going to be like 8 years down the road from now, because if she has the potential of earning more with raises and getting promotions, sometimes, guys, you got to be Mr. Mom. You got to Michael Keaton yourself. That's a deep cut reference to a great 80s movie. But that conversation where you go like, okay, is my year's salary worth taking in? And then at least I have these pockets during the day where I'm with other adults versus staying home. And there's value to staying home. There's value to being there with your children. If you think like, well, we'll come out ahead financially by doing this. I will warn people right off the bat. I'm like, if you become known as the parent who's home all the time, be ready for those random requests. Those people are like, my mother-in-law is coming in from the airport and it was changed and I can't find a sitter. Could you just come watch Joey for half an hour? You become this de facto, I guess, babysitter caregiver, because people think, well, you've got time. You're home. And it couldn't be further from the truth.
Oh my gosh. No, parenting it's crazy it's a
full-time job.
It's so much more than a full-time job, right? A job is in many cases 8 hours, right? You punch a clock and you go home. And when you go home, your work stays at work. But literally, this larval creature is stuck to your body.
Yeah, you can't fire your kids.
No.
You can fire your subordinates.
No, and it's just, and whatever they need. And you cannot anticipate that their eating habits will be the same today as they were yesterday, or their sleeping habits will be the same. Each stage of growth, like literally each day is different. And it's incredible. You're just like this whole time learning what your baby needs. And just when you think you've got it figured out, nope. They're hitting a growth spurt and everything changes again. And it's just insane how demanding it is, and how they don't know. They don't care. They don't care that you actually haven't had a shower in 3 days, right? They just, it's overwhelming.
I had a friend who worked at Payless, and he said, you know what joke every parent knows, but it's not like they tell each other this joke. It's something that they think they've come up with that's clever. Well, why don't you just wear the boxes out for your teenage boys who are getting their bigger and bigger feet all the time? And he goes, I hear that joke 9 times a day. 9 times a day do I have a parent who comes in who says the kid should just wear the boxes out because their feet are so big. And they're not delivering this kid joke to the kid. They're delivering it to the salesperson. And he's like, do you want these cross trainers or not? Like, come on, let's just get this sale happening. My mom said the worst part of child rearing were the birthday parties from age 1 to 5. Because I don't know what's going on as a baby, but you know that you want other babies to be around there. So now you're figuring out who you can invite to bring in. You have to get gifts for other people so that the other babies who are there don't get jealous and mad.
It's like you just got a bunch of confused elves.
Yep, exactly, right? And then you've got the parents who are already kind of pissed off that they've got to come to a birthday party for a 2-year-old. She goes, I hated those birthday parties because you throw one and then you're obligated to a dozen others.
Yeah, no. I think I'm lucky in that respect that my husband's family doesn't really go crazy about birthdays as much as other folks, and we in general are kind of reticent to get into too much commercial celebration of anything. So we really avoided a lot of that, right? When we started having birthday parties, the kids were a little older so that they could understand what was happening and appreciate them. And we always did, we never did anything that was highly commercialized, right? We didn't go to Chuck E. Cheese or whatever for birthday parties. Ours was like, so Cameron is a March birthday, which is really a hard period of time to have a birthday party because you don't know if you're going to be in winter or in spring or in summer, right? And I still remember one of the best birthday parties we ever had for him was when he was about 7, and we told all of his friends to come with all of their snow gear. And then we went down to the park, and essentially what ended up happening was it was a mud fest. It was a total mud fest because it had been total winter like the day before, piles of snow everywhere, and then it all started melting and we were like, go outside anyway. And those boys were just covered head to toe, and then we were like, okay, take off your snowsuit out here on the porch. And their parents came and picked them up, and they were all in various levels of like they didn't really have clothes left on because they were so caked.
Could have just hosed them down.
They had so much fun, right? They didn't care that they weren't at Chuck E. Cheese. They were like, these people let us go play in the mud, like roll around in the mud. It's like, that was the best birthday party.
Maybe some passive aggressive parents on the way home being like, oh, so now we've got to clean up. We've got the snowsuit.
Yep.
The snowsuit is covered in mud.
I just washed it yesterday because I thought I was going to put it away for the year.
Mom and Dad, the Wintersteens let me play in the mud. It was so much fun. We were throwing mud balls at each other.
Yeah, they were just caked. It was so funny.
I think, at one point during this podcast, you're talking about this unconditional love you feel for something that, is not even here yet. That's still on its way. And one of the things I've really come to appreciate over the years is the unconditional love you learn for a non-biological child. Because that is a story that is so incredibly common. And as we're finally progressing inch by inch, it seems like, in the world where same-sex couples want to have a baby and it's not necessarily possible for them to have a biological child, but they instantly know that this child is a part of their family, and that and how that love kind of it just manifests itself, and it gets there, and all of a sudden you're loving a foster kid that you're in the process of adoption, or you're loving the baby that's been presented to you through the gift of surrogacy, and you still have to figure that out. So when people say it's natural and parenting will just come to you like that, they're full of shit.
No, everything has to be learned.
Right.
Everything has to be learned, right? You learn how to parent, and children then learn, you have to teach them everything in the world. But that's actually part of the fascination, right? I think part of what is so amazing and cool about parenting is that perspective, that fresh perspective of how much you enjoy the mundane of the world because it's new in the baby's eyes, right? It's new in the baby's experience. And it's so fun to say, today she learned this, right? It might simply be that today she learned how to hold a spoon. That's like monumental, right? Or today she learned that she is in the mirror, that it's another person, but not just a person. It's her. Like today I saw that light bulb go, oh, it's not just that when I move my arm, that other baby's arm goes too. It's, that's me, right? Like just those kinds of things that become so fascinating. And that same learning happens regardless of whether or not the baby is biologically yours. That same learning about everything in the world and the power of being able to teach that baby or that tiny human or that young human all of the things that are important to you, right? The way of seeing the world that's important to you. That's really, it's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly, it's a huge responsibility, but it's also like, oh, yeah, I should work hard at not screwing this up, right? If I want to make a human that I want to actually really enjoy being around for the rest of my life, then I have to impart the best lessons I've learned. And I have to try and be the best me I can be. And try not to be selfish. Try to control my temper. Try to use words that are kind and encouraging because I want the child to feel kindness and encouragement, right? Like all of that best self stuff is really palpable when you're aware of absolutely everything. When you're parenting, you're aware of your breath, you're aware of your moods, you're aware of when you need your own space because you don't want to infect the kid with all the worst parts of you. You want to figure out how to make the best version of you.
And I think even sometimes when people try their best and they try their hardest, you have to realize too that kids are individuals, right?
Absolutely.
They're not just, they take in sustenance solely from their mother during the gestation process. But the second that they hit the globe, you're this piece, and you're a big piece right when they're a baby, but you become a smaller and smaller piece as they grow and they develop. Mm-hmm. And so if they are going to a daycare where there's a kid who's constantly hitting, they learn to hit back. And it always amazes me because I'll see a parent who's just feels like, oh, I made all these mistakes.
Yeah.
Be like, I don't really think that there's mistakes when parenting. There's missteps and there are different directions you could have gone in, but hindsight's 20/20.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to say like, well, this is an individual. That's what I want. I don't want a carbon copy of what I assume they should be. You want them to have that individuality for it.
And there's really nothing you can do about that one.
Right.
Like they just are. They just are themselves.
And then they'll say something and be like, oh my God, my husband must have done something because I know he didn't learn it from me. Yep. I love that phrase. This is from your side of the family.
Yes.
It's from your side of the family.
Yep.
There's one of my favorite gags from Calvin and Hobbes was when one of the strips where it's the parents are the focus and mom is going off on something Calvin did and she's like pointing at dad and like, this is because of you and blah, 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 blah. And this is blah, blah. And she walks out and he goes, I wanted a dog.
So Cry It Out.
Yeah.
Opens when?
It opens Thursday, April 25th.
And runs through
Saturday, May 18th.
Okay.
So 4 weekends.
Tickets are on sale now?
Tickets are on sale. We also have, so how with each show, Theater B does our Sunday Salon, which is a post-show conversation and social. And ours just happens to fall on Mother's Day.
Oh, boy.
So we're going to do, mimosas and yummy snacks and sort of a, hey, ladies, take Sunday afternoon, Mother's Day. You've done your church and brunch obligations, but now in the afternoon, come and see a show that's all about you and stay for a conversation and social time with friends and family. So that's Mother's Day.
I have a question. One thing that we're seeing a lot more now, especially with previous podcast guest Tim Jorgensen, are stay-at-home dads.
Yeah.
Are families where instead of that stereotypical dad goes back to work and mom stays home, that it's the mother who has the career and that it's the father who decides to stay home. So for the stay-at-home dads out there, will the themes of this play resonate for them as well?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think they will, and I love that Tim's character is
Tim Larson, not Tim Jorgensen.
Tim Larson gets to feature that the way that this looks from the father's perspective, which is in many ways not different from the mother's perspective. What we learn in the play is that. He talks about his wife sort of in this way of that they are observing this friendship that's blossoming between these other two characters, Jesse and Lena. And he observes this friendship and he says, I can tell my wife wants what you have. And what we learn in the play is actually he wants what they have. He wants to be a stay-at-home dad and enjoy this time with his infant. And so he's also struggling with those societal expectations that say he shouldn't be. It should not be a foregone conclusion that he will do that, right? And he's like he talks about, I don't know why I didn't think of it before, right? Why was it not sort of a normal conversation for us to just say, so which one of us is going to stay home, as opposed to that the wife would want to do that, right? Or that the wife that her job would allow for it more easily than his, or that kind of thing. It just the notion that they didn't challenge that expectation until after it became kind of a tension between them, right? So no, there's definitely a lot of stuff in there that's really just about parenting, and then it points at the ways in which our society doesn't do the training very well, doesn't challenge the expectations until people are sort of thrown into the situation without enough resources and options and ways of having that conversation in a more deliberative way. Yeah. So no, yeah, totally for dads too.
I think, this shows something that'll spark a great conversation with the people you go see the play with. So I think of friends of mine who are pregnant right now who are more or less avoiding some conversations, the things like, remember I took this job because it was going to pay well, but I just found out that their maternity leave is just a leave of absence. There's no money involved. Remember when your cousin told us we should have gotten short-term, disability? Well, we didn't get that. Now we're pregnant, so we can't get it. So we're going to be without this income during that time. So while I'm pregnant, we're both going to have to work extra jobs to make up for that loss of income and new expenses that are going to go on at the same time. There's so much more than just like getting pregnant is difficult in some situations, but being pregnant and everything that entails for everybody involved can be entirely just throwing absolute shit into a giant industrial fan and hoping that when you walk away, you can still make your shift at Hardee's. And there's so much that goes into it. And I hate the fact that we focus so much on maternity leave and not paternity leave.
Right.
So mom or dad.
Parental leave.
It's so important.
This is the single, I mean, it really is. It's the single biggest life change anybody goes through, right? You know, they talk about stress points when you have a big life change experience, whether it's a move or a job change or a wedding or a funeral, right? But having a baby is like off the charts, way more stress points in terms of the psychology of it, and huge upheaval in your life. Absolutely everything changes. Everything from when you eat your meals, what your sleep schedule is, what your financial situation is, what is your relationship to the other, all of it. Everything changes when you have
and when you have that kid, you finally know, well, I know one aspect of my life for the next 18 to 20 years. Right? Like, it's
going to involve taking care of this person. And in many ways, for the first, I don't know, several years, this person's needs come before mine and before my partner's, right? This person's needs come first all the time. Wow. Talk about a like complete 180 life shift, right? Your perspective is completely different when you have a child.
There are so many cliches when it comes to having a child of like, oh, well, you're never going to sleep again. But
it's so true.
Like there's some truth in it. Like there's truth in comedy. I was recently talking to a friend of mine who said she just got a big promotion at work and they are going to move her into this nice new office. And she goes, but it's completely glassed in. And I was like, so what are you watching porn? Like what's going on? She goes, no, but when I have this baby, I'm going to have to pump, and we do not have a
privacy place,
a privacy place in our office building. So she goes, I don't really want to go and sit on the crapper with wog going on the whole time. And the first time that even dawned on me that is a moment to moment struggle for mothers is when I went to a destination wedding in Florida with some friends of ours from Denver. She had a baby recently and she had to pump. And so we'd be waiting in line to go on the flying world of Harry Potter, and she'd be like, guys, I gotta pump. I gotta pump right now. I should have pumped 10 minutes ago. And we were like, oh, okay. And they would have to get out of the line that they'd already waited in for an hour. And then they didn't go on that ride because they had to walk all the way through the park to the parking structure where she hung out underneath part of a blanket while she pumped for a baby that doesn't even consume that. The baby is back in Denver with grandma and grandpa consuming the frozen milk that she has been sucking out of her body.
Yep.
Yeah. And I said, so what are you going to do with, what are you going to do with it? And she goes, well, you got to dump it. I can't keep it
actually fresh. There are donor banks now.
They're becoming way more.
When I was raising my kids, there were not.
And why did it take so long for us to realize that something like a breast milk donation bank is something that makes so much sense to everybody?
Because, even like baby food and baby everything has been so commercialized. It's not that social structure anymore. We're all in our little silos, and it's like we're supposedly individuals doing it. And then you realize, oh no, actually there are lots of other people doing the same thing right now. And we actually can learn from one another and create community that is somewhat arbitrary and different from the one we had before. But boy, if you can do that, if you can create that community, then you have that awareness that, oh, wow, this other woman cannot pump enough for this kid that's growing like crazy, right? I was that mom. I could not keep up with my kid when I went to work. My son, I couldn't keep up with him when I went to work. He went through everything I'd frozen by like the Wednesday of my first week back. And I was like, oh, shoot, And so it just meant that, guess what? Now half the feedings are dad's because they're bottles. Mm-hmm. He's still eating every 3 hours, and it takes 2 of those 3 hours to do the feeding. Mm. Now I'm not the only person who has a random, 45 minutes to do everything else in every 3 hour period, including sleeping and making meals and all of it, right? I literally would throw the baby at David and say, quick, I need to pee, right? That was just
And these are the secrets that we seem to be keeping from other parents.
I know.
And I don't understand what the whole point of it is.
It's partly the isolation of the parenting. You're just so involved in doing the thing to take care of the child right now that there's not the opportunity to sort of report out, from Planet Parent. This is how it's going here. And that's one of the things I love about this play. This is a play about new parenting. It's not the subject of plays normally. So I'm just delighted that here's this wonderful playwright who's done such a great job of capturing the sort of the mundane, everyday and reality and absurdity of things like, quick, hold the baby while I go pee. Now I can take the baby and do the other boob, right? Like that kind of stuff that is somewhat private. It is, just by virtue of it being so immediate and constant, right? That there's just not that chance to say, hey, world, there's this funny thing that goes on. Oh, and by the way, it is my life experience for an entire year, right?
Do they touch in the play at all about the parenting from other parents? Because I think that's the thing that most people get frustrated with, is that there's a million people out there who have a million different opinions, and they judge you so harshly on your choices.
Yeah, they do touch on that in the play, but actually, one of the beauties of it is that these two women who meet each other in this circumstance and wouldn't have met in any other circumstance are very conscientious about not judging one another.
Oh, nice.
And that's a part of what actually bonds them, is that willingness to say, you do you, no judgment here. And that's a part of what makes them really kind of begin to respect one another and care about one another. They compare. They kind of compare notes, like, what did your doctor say, as they try to make those choices. But they are conscious not to make the choice for one another.
One of my favorite subreddits is about mothers telling stories that are essentially anonymous because it's the internet, and just getting it out there, letting someone know. And I read this one where this woman had talked about how she fell asleep while she was vacuuming. She was just so tired, and she goes, I had to move some cushions, and I sat down and I fell asleep, and her baby was crawling age, and the baby got a hold of the suction tube on the thing, and so when she woke up, probably only 6 minutes later, the baby was covered in these giant hickey marks everywhere because it had just sucked the tube to it and then moved it a little bit, and it was on his chubby little legs and chubby little arms. And she said, it was intensely embarrassing because when her husband came home, she was trying to explain what happened. And then she said, and then of course, Grandma and Grandpa came by and she had to explain what happened. And she goes, all these people looked at her like, they're like, you fell asleep while the baby, what if his arm had gotten sucked up into the vacuum? And she goes, but it didn't. And so she puts this on Reddit. And she goes, please don't, tear me apart, but I've just got to tell everyone the story. It must have been 20, me too, me too, me too, me too. And then people started posting pictures of when their child had gotten a hold of the vacuum tube. And one kid had this just giant, it was just a big hickey on his cheek. And I think that you need that. You need to be able to tell someone about a parenting misstep without Automatically being judged. If you've ever gone to a garage sale where someone's selling an old crib, people freak out. They freak out. And I mean, for good reason, because they found that some cribs, especially the older stuff, are not good for babies.
Right.
And, we've learned a lot in the last 150 years about how to help our babies survive. In fact, Fisher-Price right now is going through, it's an inclined sleeping device that was introduced in 2009 that they're still producing and still selling that has caused over 30 infant deaths.
Oh.
And so it's the type of thing that when you read about it, when you read the report, you go and parents just the reaction is get this out of the house, get this. It's almost like it's a demon that you're exorcising. You might as well be throwing holy water on it while you shove it into the trash. But then You go to the house where they still have one of those and their baby's sleeping and you're like, oh my God, what are you doing to your baby? Your baby's going to die.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Right? And everyone's got opinions and everyone thinks that their opinion is the best and this is what worked. How many times have you ever heard someone be like, oh, teething? Just put a little whiskey on your finger and rub it on the gums. Just drunk up your baby.
When I think specifically my little sister, I don't think he ever did it to me, but my little sister, when she was, first year of her life, and she would be fussy and having trouble sleeping or whatever, my dad, what he would do is he would take her and he would balance her on her stomach on his hand.
Yeah.
And he would just sit and watch TV. And we've got photos of my dad just basically balancing my baby sister on his hand. And it was just the right position that she'd fall asleep. And then this baby would just fall asleep, like basically suspended in midair while my dad's holding her in the center. So there's all sorts of little tips and tricks that you find out. I guess if other parents should be giving out these secrets more often because it just only benefits the group. I want to quick too, before we wrap up, give a shout out to Deborah Davey, who is the set designer on this show. She was also the set designer for the Santaland Diaries that we did over Christmas time. I have not seen this show yet, but I have seen the set. And I am absolutely in love with this set. I love this set. It looks like part of a yard with like a swing set and like part of a house next to it. Phenomenal. I would say no matter what, it's going to be a great show. But even if you want to come just for the set, you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
I think this whole season, your sets have been knock out of the park good.
Oh, thanks.
Blackbird was one of the coolest sets that I think I've ever seen on stage.
Yeah.
Talking about making use of space.
Right. Oh, and creating that environment. When the guys said, oh, yeah, we're just going to use fluorescent lights. I was like, what? Really? Are you sure? And they're like, yeah, it's going to feel awful.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, it does.
Our designers have done an amazing job this year of creating a sense of place on our stage. Santaland was another amazing example of that. I mean, that set was bonkers.
Yeah.
And that was a set that doesn't necessarily put you in a real world space, but it totally matched the feel of the show.
Yeah.
And Deborah is just phenomenal.
She's great. Can I tell a little story about this set? So so when we read this play, a part of what we loved about it was that the set almost doesn't actually call for anything. It calls for the original set was just this kind of dead looking grass, right? Like springtime grass, the way grass looks right now here in town, where there are some patches that are kind of green, but mostly it's this weird brown gray color, and then there's this play set, right? A child's play set, and that's the set. That's all there is. And so we were really debating about should we attempt this grass on our stage, and so Deborah went online and was looking for the techniques of how might you take AstroTurf and give it this aged, gross, springtime look to it. And she said, oh, I found this great blog in one of the technical theater sites about the technique to do this. And then we realized what it was the actual video from the original production at the Humana Festival.
Wow.
And they take you through each of the steps in the process of making your beautiful green, bright AstroTurf look like shitty spring grass. And it's fabulous. So our shitty spring grass is very realistic looking, and including like mud spots, right? Where the characters have to avoid walking and all that
is
stuff.
Slick.
So it is. It's a very realistic looking set, but it is the technique from the original production at the Humana Festival.
Just FYI, we are actually past 10 o'clock. I didn't realize that we're a little bit late.
That's fine.
So I know you're late for your tech. But.
They are doing, my tech is going well. I've got a great team. They are doing a costume quick change rehearsal first, so they don't really need me for that.
Excellent. Good.
It's really about them all learning the timing of transitions, and they'll be fine.
Well, let's wrap this thing up. Let's remind people again. Cry It Out at Theater B, starts on April
25th.
The day this episode comes out.
The day this episode comes out. Nice. So listen to this and then go see it, or see it and then listen to it, whatever order you choose.
Or watch it while listening to it.
Yeah.
No, don't actually
So
do
it runs
that.
for 4 weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, with 2 Sunday matinees on the 5th and the 12th. The 12th is Mother's Day, and we'd love it if people want to come and stay for the social. And yeah, so that it'll run through May 18th. So basically the little window of time between Easter and Memorial Day is when you can come and see this fabulous new play that's both hysterically funny and slightly heartbreaking about parenting in modern America.
theaterb.org for tickets.
Correct.
And you
701-729-8880.
Correct.
Oh, say that again slower.
701-729-8880.
Well done. Nicely put together there. Carrie, thank you so much for stopping by again.
Thank you. So delightful to be here.
A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today, because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomoorhead.com. That's livefargomoorhead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJ Meets World and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. I have man boobs, and so I'm always worried when I'm holding a baby that they're going to try and suckle. So that's why I'm going to decline if you offer me a baby. Just know that.